All right, we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney here in town. The number is 737-7587 if you want to call in. And just remind folks again about the nature of malpractice attorneys. There's a lot of attorneys out there, some of whom may say they can handle such cases, but what makes it special if you're designated that?
Right. I'm a certified medical malpractice specialist by the American Board of Professional Liability Attorneys. And what they do is they have attorneys provide written examination or have written examinations and oral examinations. We have to have a certain amount of trials under our belt, medical malpractice trials. And if we've successfully completed the process, then we are certified and we're allowed to advertise ourselves and practice as specialists. And if you go on the website, Tennessee Commission on Continuing Legal Education, there's maybe about 20 of us across the entire state who are actually certified. And probably in the Nashville area, Nick, there's 5 to 10 lawyers who do this like I do on a regular basis. We're a very small fraternity. And you'll find that that's pretty much the case in Memphis and pretty much the case in Knoxville because what we do is highly specialized and it's very, very expensive work to do.
I was about to say, it's expensive and there aren't a ton of cases. I mean, you keep busy, obviously, but there aren't a ton of cases that you have come through the door, or you've gotten cases off this show that meet your criteria for whether you can take it, right? I mean, tort law has made it more difficult to sue, right? It's just, it's more difficult. It's not like there's a personal injury. I would think there's a lot of those lawyers out there. There's not as many of you because there aren't as many cases. Yeah,
with personal injury lawyers, they can take just about anything and they can do some fairly minimal work and get a case settled or resolved, and oftentimes quickly. In our world, that doesn't happen often. In fact, that happens very rarely. In our world, we have to work a case up, spend a lot of time and money getting the case to a point where it can be settled, and there are all sorts of legal technicalities that have to be followed to make sure the case advances properly. So I have to be very selective in the cases that I take to make sure that they're good investments and also that I can help the client.
Well, and keep in mind then, again, for a lot of folks saying, well, I don't have the money to get a retainer to hire Clint Kelly.
They don't pay anything. They don't pay anything. I advance all the costs in the case to pursue the case, which is why I have to be very selective, because if the case is lost, the client doesn't pay anything. I'm the one that has to pay the expenses.
Exactly. And you've been on this program, and again, we'll say it now. I mean, you've had people walk through your door that you agreed, you know what, you were wronged here, but there just aren't the damages here to make it worth our while to sue because it's going to cost too much to do so, correct?
Right, and that's probably the number one hang-up besides the statute of limitations, which we'll talk about later, but the fact that the damages aren't sufficient enough, in my judgment, to get a jury to want to compensate because juries really expect in these cases someone has to be badly injured in order to be compelled to hold a physician accountable.
All right. Yeah. So sometimes you say, you know what, you've been wronged, but I can't help you.
Right.
I mean,
that's just the way the system is.
That's the reality, the economics of it. Let me ask you this about, if you would, the statute of limitations. You've also had cases that have come through your door that were good ones, doozies, and you're like, all right, let's get working on this. And then they say, and you say, when did it happen? It happened 2 years ago. And you're like, oh. Right.
I mean, it's a significant number of cases where patients have waited too long to call, and there are a lot of reasons for it.
Yeah, don't wait if you're at home right now and you have a thought. Now's your chance. Give us a call.
In Tennessee, the law is you have 1 year from the date that you discover that you've been injured to file what's called or serve a pre-suit notice. That's a precursor to a lawsuit. You just have to keep in mind you've got 1 year, and if you wait longer than 1 year absent some extraordinary circumstances, you're not going to get your day in court. And so that's why we always preach here from this show, if you think that you have had something, if you think you've been a victim of a major medical mistake or your family member has, pick up the phone and call. Don't sit and wait and think, well, it's just going to get better and it'll go away. Even if the doctor says, well, let's wait about a year and see how things go, and then when it doesn't get better, you're like, well, I guess I'm going to need to hire a lawyer, and by that time it's too late.
It's interesting when doctors say let's wait about a year.
Yeah.
Let's take a call from Joe. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Joe.
Just want to thank Mr. Kelly for coming on and wising people up to some of this stuff. But several years ago, when this was way back in the past, but there was a case where this person had back surgery, and they used some appliances called knot rods. And it was put in, wasn't successful, and about, I don't know where it was, a year or less, they started protruding out the back, So they had to go in and take them back out. After some further investigation from somebody that was working in the operating room, they were told that the salesman that sold these appliances was actually in the operating room, and it was with the doctor, and actually put the rods in with the doctor watching to see how to do this procedure.
Was the salesman a doctor?
No.
No, of course not. And you've got to be kidding me. That had to be a doozy of a lawsuit, Joe.
Well, at that time, this, like I say, has been a period of years ago. If people like Mr. Kelly had been around, this probably would have been a lawsuit. This particular doctor did a bunch of these surgeries, back surgeries, and got started getting a lot of complaints and lawsuits and things. And he just took bankruptcy and retired. So you couldn't collect any money from him. So you can get in predicaments, but thanks to Mr. Kelly, this probably today would not happen. But there's a lot of things goes on in these operating rooms that people don't know about.
Yeah, because they're unconscious most of the time. Joe, that's real interesting. Yeah,
I want to follow up on Joe's point.
Yeah,
I'm glad he brought this up because this is a case you and I have never talked about before. I had a case about 10 years ago where a lady had a procedure. It's called a thermal ablation, where they basically, in order to treat endometrial bleeding, female menstrual bleeding, they will inject superheated water into the vaginal area, into the uterus, to try to burn off the lining inside there, and that is a recognized treatment. The problem is this machine that injects the water, you have to be very careful on how you seal it. The salesman who was selling this equipment to gynecologists across the Middle Tennessee area was in the surgical suite telling the doctor how to use the equipment. Now, I don't know if he ever touched it, but he was actually directing the surgery.
During a procedure. You would think the doctors would be trained on this before they use it.
The liquid leaked out, and this woman got third-degree burns all the way down her
and inside of her thighs and everything. Oh my gosh!
It was a really big lawsuit that I handled, and when I got into this, I had no idea that salesmen participate to the extent that they do.
How did you find out that the salesman was in there?
The nurses that were in there told me, and as well the maker of the device. There were all kinds of emails and memoranda about the salesman being in there. Well, of course, the patient saying, look, I didn't consent to that. I gave no permission for anybody to be directing my surgeon. The surgeon really had no business doing the procedure anyway because he wasn't properly trained on it. You don't just start out with somebody. But what Joe says happened with those screws or those knots happens in a lot of different cases, and people just don't know it. They don't find out. Sometimes most of the time they never find out. Sometimes they won't find out until there's a lawsuit. But it was a really horrible case.
That is an extreme.
And the salesman, he didn't really know what he was doing.
Who did you go after in that case? Was it the company?
The manufacturer and the gynecologist.
You went after both.
Correct. Because the manufacturer didn't train the salesman right, nor did I think they have a proper medical device. The gynecologist wasn't sufficiently trained, and he should have never had the salesman directing how to perform the surgery. It's a terrible case.
You know, and that's amazing. I don't want to get too far afield here, but Clint, you're such an expert on a lot of the stuff with medical stuff. That's one of my concerns in general, not just with devices like this, but the cozy relationship between these pharmaceutical reps and doctors, the ones that show up. What is it? There's 20 medicines that a doctor can prescribe to me for cholesterol. How does he decide to choose which one he's going to prescribe? Because I'm not necessarily asking for one. It might just be that pharmaceutical rep that bought him the turkey at Thanksgiving. You know what I'm talking about? There's a very cozy relationship. What you just described is as cozy as I can imagine. The rep being in the surgical room in the OR, monitoring and helping with the procedure. But I mean, should consumers? I guess this is a stupid question. Should you be concerned? Darn right. I mean, but when doctors, how much do they study themselves and make a decision on their own, or they figure, you know, all these drugs, this guy gave me a turkey at Thanksgiving, I owe him a favor, I'm going to prescribe his drugs.
I told you off the air, there's a USA Today article about a hospital in Memphis whose physicians were, this was the hospital that had the most money taken by their physicians from pharmaceutical companies. to press their drugs. I don't.
It's
look,
insane.
It could all be legit from the standpoint maybe they are the best drugs. It's just when people see that,
It's conflict of interest.
they
for the doctor.
feel like
Yeah.
there's a conflict of interest and it concerns consumers.
Right, that's my point.
When they
is that
know about it.
When they know about it. And obviously it works. I mean, it was a couple years ago. It was one of the ham places downtown. And I went down there to get mine, and there was a line out the door. And I thought holidays, but I just thought, me, I talk. And I'm like, they were all doctors. And I said, what's the story? And one of them just pulled out a pharmaceutical rep, gave me this coupon, free $35 ham. And they were all there. And obviously it works. These reps, there are people who have been in the news business who have left that go to become pharmaceutical reps. And they've got the drugs for the company, they've been trained, and they go door to door to all these doctors. A lot of time they're attractive young women, as a matter of fact.
They most of the time are.
Yeah, and sometimes attractive men, but whatever. They're selling something is what it is. And the doctors take this in there, and my question is, are the doctors prescribing something because of the pitch or because they really believe this drug's best for you?
I mean, Nick, we do have a free market system, for good or for bad. That's what it is. And there's nothing illegal or unethical necessarily about it if it's done properly.
It's done all the time. It's legit.
Just, in some cases, it looks bad. And we know some drugs are being peddled just by the way you said through these methods that otherwise perhaps the drug wouldn't be prescribed. It looks bad to the public.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too far afield. I want to throw this out there for some people maybe watching. Clint, in general, you've seen all types of different cases, but what is the most common type of malpractice case? Or what types maybe people might understand out there? Back injuries that go wrong, that kind of surgery. Is there a type of surgery that is more likely to produce a problem that you could sue on? Or any ideas? There are 2 or 3 different types of procedures that you would say, that happens a lot. We've seen this. I know. Why do the mistakes happen?
Yeah. In terms of surgeries, I would say that the number one surgery that there are complications from that seem preventable are gallbladder surgeries, where gallbladders are removed. Yeah, there have been a lot of cases I've had where the doctor screwed up the gallbladder removal, and there's a whole host of reasons why. And some of those cases turn out to be good. I get a lot of back surgery cases, but I take very, very few of them simply because it's hard to prove the rules are violated. You start getting into the back, there's a lot of things that can go wrong that the physician can't control. You talk about bad outcomes. Doctors aren't miracle workers. They try to do the best they can, but those cases, they're just hard to make against neurosurgeons. Probably.
What about when doctors just check someone out without doing the proper tests or something along those lines? They send someone home who has a heart attack.
The most common case is the misdiagnosis case, the case where there is a diagnosis that clearly should be made, it's missed, and as a result the patient's harmed or dies. That's the most common medical negligence case that I've handled in my career.
Take a break on that note. The number 737-7587 if you want to join in the conversation. Our final segment talking about medical malpractice with Clint Kelly right after this.